Folks, welcome to the Crossing Swords podcast brought to you by Batavia Downs, where sometimes our signals get crossed, but our swords always are. And I'm not solo today. I am brought to you with the one, the only Mike Bunt. Bunty, how are we doing today? Buffalo Sabres, tough loss last night.
I'm doing all right. The good news is after a tough loss, they have another game tonight to try to bounce back. So hopefully they're not too tired and they can go on the road in Detroit and try to get back on track with a win.
And are you concerned? Last night, Buffalo Sabres fall to the New York Islanders in a game that, Bunty, you were there in person. It was a little disheartening to see at times.
Yeah, it was a poor performance overall. I don't think it's the end of the world. There were some decent moments overall in the game, but it's never pretty when you go up against the Islanders. I think the most concerning thing is that it seems like some of the things defensively they might have backtracked and reverted to some of their old ways. So that's a little bit concerning for me, but just a game you got to move on from overall.
Yeah, I mean, especially you're on the road today in Detroit against an Atlantic team. They need to find a way to bounce back. And I think compared to other years where they would sometimes find themselves spiraling out of control and having one loss spiral into a handful, this could be a big test where, you lose back-to-back games. Can you stop it from becoming 3, 4, and really kind of losing your season early on in the year where you're not trying to dig yourself out of a massive hole come January, come February, you're trying to, make that push toward the postseason and they can stay around 500. I think that would be really big for this team. I think, Bunty, a big thing from last night and something we were all hoping would happen, Dylan Cousins finally found the back of the net. Do you think this is something he can build off of going off of, last night? And we can hopefully see this as a more full-time thing for him and kind of get back to his old ways a little bit.
I mean, hopefully. I had a feeling he was going to score last night. Wearing the black jerseys at home. I was wearing my black goat head Dylan Cousins jersey. So I just thought last night was going to be the night that it finally ended. And it was nice to see him get a goal. I do think at times Cousins does show some flash. The frustrating thing with Dylan Cousins is I still don't think he's a bad hockey player, but the combination of some of the mental mistakes he's made this year, the lack of finishing ability, combined with his struggles last year, it makes him an easy target. And when you are a guy that had 30-plus goals 2 years ago and you have a big long-term contract extension, you're going to be expected to perform better. But I'm far less worried about Dylan Cousins than I am guys like Jack Quinn at this current moment in time. I think Cousins has shown enough to say that like he probably will eventually get on track, whether that be a great season or an okay season. I still think he'll be okay. He'll be decent at some point this year.
And yeah, Bunty, I don't know if you're a big believer in the Mandela effect, but I keep seeing videos of, the Peterka, Cousins, Quinn line from a couple years ago. And I see that. I'm like, what happened to them? Obviously, Peterka's doing great things on the first line. He's finding his own footing. But Cousins and Quinn looked like totally different players just a couple years ago. And I don't know what, that's been this year, whether, Quinn's battled injuries the past couple seasons, trying to find his form. But do you even think a guy like Quinn can benefit from being out of the lineup? I think you put out a tweet yesterday, or at least retweeted something that Yuri Kulik's been out of the lineup now for 2 games after going on a 3-game win streak, and the Sabres have lost back-to-back games. Is he a guy you want to see find his way back into this Sabres lineup? Because I thought he looked good when he was in the lineup, especially towards the end of that, his initial stint here.
Yeah, I would like him back on. I don't like changing up things when things are going all right. I think back to they had a 3-game winning streak. They were playing pretty well. And then you force Abe Kubel back in the lineup. And I understand you signed him to play. You didn't sign him to sit. But I felt like they had a good thing going, and I didn't really understand why the need to really switch things up. Now, I understand separating Cousins and Quinn because they've struggled, but I liked what the third line was when it was McLeod, Zucker, Greenway. And I was a little concerned about how things would look when you broke them up. Now what we're kind of discovering is that Zucker, McLeod, Greenway, you can basically pair those guys with a lot of different combos and still have them play at a high level. Like Zucker looks solid regardless of where he's at in this lineup. McLeod looks decent wherever he's at in the lineup. Same with Greenway. So I think we're starting to isolate what the real issues might be. And it is kind of tough right now. Kulik has been solid. I'd like to see him get more playing time. We haven't even talked about Zach Benson. He hasn't even seen the ice in forever, so who knows where he's at. So while there is some frustration, if I'm Jack Quinn, I'm thinking right now I'm going to have to start performing soon, or I'm going to start getting healthy scratch for Kulik and Benson once Benson's healthy enough to return, because this is from a Jack Quinn supporter scenario. This is kind of the worst case scenario where you think, okay, last year 9 goals, 27 games, he's going to carry it over. He just looks lost out there. He's making bad decisions with the puck. The finishing isn't there because he's not even getting chances. Maybe the injuries are impacting his play, but you would have thought that would have impacted him when he returned last year, which it didn't really at that point. So it's time to really start discussing these lines and where Jack Quinn plays a role going forward.
Yeah, because he's a guy that has really stayed in the lineup strictly because of his name and what he's done in the past. And he's a guy we both talked so highly of this offseason and thought he could easily return to form, being back with Dylan Cousins and Zach Benson, that the three of those guys could find success together. And we've unfortunately not seen that. We're hoping, obviously it's going to take a couple of games for guys to get back in the swing of things, but we're 11 games into the season, which is still early, yes, but you're hoping to see some sort of life there where his only goal came from like a 200-foot empty netter, which, was big and we needed that goal, but we haven't seen the Jack Quinn on 5-on-5 that we've seen. Even like a guy, special teams on the power play, you would think you could build that second unit around a guy like Jack Quinn and really find a two-headed attack where you're not just relying on a Tage Thompson one-timer or that first unit to really find success. And that's going to, what I think is going to help the Sabres team really get to that next level is having that second area of scoring where you're not relying on that first line and that Cousins Quinn line can finally produce again. And I think, Bunty, we've seen a lot of talk on Twitter the past week, especially on now that we've had some time to look at these Sabres additions from the offseason. A lot of people are saying the Sabres not do enough. Do they do a really good job? Because these additions have shown a lot of success. I think a guy like Jason Zucker, who I was a little weary of at first, has really come into his own these past couple of games, scoring some big goals. He got the power play on the board finally, got one last night after missing a penalty shot. He's the guy that's really finding success. That fourth line, I think, is, won a lot of fans' hearts over with the way they play. But Bunty, how are you feeling on these offseason additions from Kevin Adams? And do you think he could have done more to bolster the Sabres forward crew right now?
I love that you just brought this up, and we didn't actually even talk about how this was going to be a transition, because I was just looking at a tweet from Joe Marino this morning where he just tweeted, Sabres offseason, Jason Zucker has been one of the best players, looking like a real top six forward. Ryan McLeod has been a great 3 center for them. Albe Kubel, Malin Lafferty, giving them what they wanted on a new look fourth line. He said, the worst offseason ever, though. Like, let's be real. The offseason additions have been fantastic. And everybody hated it because they weren't splashy big moves. But they have all worked out well, which goes to show that just because a team has been bad doesn't mean that every decision that you make is bad. Sabres fans wanted a splash. They didn't get the splash. So they hated on all these moves. And those moves are the reason why the team is as competitive as what they are right now. Now, the record isn't where you want it to be. But imagine if they didn't have Zucker. Imagine if they didn't have McLeod and some of these guys on the fourth line. This team would be the same, would be even crappier than what the record currently is. So I think the offseason was good. Now, they would have been able to add a top 6 forward on top of that. It could have been really good, and that could probably be the difference between this team being competitive versus a team that has a realistic chance at being really solid. Now, there's rumors right now that Kevin Adams is exploring the trade market, and he's trying to add to this team, not trying to subtract. I have to wonder, after what he's seen with this squad, the first 11 games of the year, does he try to use some of that cap room to add another top 6 forward? And does a person like Jack Quinn become a tradable asset with how little he's producing? I know you could say you never trade a player when he's down, but at some point when you're looking for opening space for Kulik in the lineup, for Benson in the lineup, Quinn is not a guy that you want on your third line or your fourth line. You might need to start discussing, is he dispensable? And yeah, if he went to another team and scored 30 goals, we'd look back and be like, this is awful, like another horrible trade. But it might be something that they have to start exploring.
Yeah, and I think too, Bunty, when we're talking about lines over the offseason, guys that were kind of getting the short end of the stick were, guys like Greenway, Krebs, guys, even like a Jason Zucker, who have shown so far this season that they can hang at the NHL level, and they're doing a really good job at that, and they're should be a part of this lineup night in and night out. And unfortunately for Jack Quinn, he just seems to be a guy who can't fit into this current, lineup for the Sabres that is going to benefit them. And I don't know what that's going to be to help him out. But even we talk about this offseason of even this past year of we're trying to hope, a lot get through some additions through subtractions. The Sabres bought out Jeff Skinner. We've talked about that to death, trading of Casey Middlestat. But a guy like Bowen Byram has had kind of an interesting start to the season. Jason Moser put out a pretty interesting tweet of like the grades for Bowen Byram this season. And I think a lot of us have, I don't say a warped perspective of how we view Byram based on his start with the Sabres last year. We had a handful of goals in his first handful of games and kind of trailed off since then. Bunty, what have your kind of thoughts been on Bowen Byram so far? He's been a guy that's hasn't been, the center of attention, I think, positively or negatively from fans online, but kind of what have been your thoughts on him through his first 11 games and hopefully moving forward?
He hasn't had the impact I was hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. Now, those grades aren't good, but I expect him to be a better player than what he's currently brought to the ice, and hopefully he can fix that. Part of his issue in Colorado was that he was a bottom pair guy and he wanted more playing time, and he really hasn't shown that he deserves that playing time based on what we've seen so far in Buffalo. But then again, he's a young player still. It takes time, especially for defensemen, to develop in this league, and he has had positive moments. It's tough because we've seen a bunch of guys that have talent come to Buffalo and not seen the best versions of themselves, and then you see them in other situations and they look a lot better. So you always question, is it the player? Is it the system? Is it the culture? The trade doesn't look great at the current moment when you see what Casey Middlestat is doing
in 7 assists.
Colorado. Yeah. But like, this is the other problem with Casey Middlestat. He has 6 goals, 7 assists, 13 points, and he's a -6. And then people will be like, well, the minus doesn't matter. Just put pucks in net. Well, the Sabres' problem right now isn't putting pucks in the net. It's keeping pucks from going in their own net. The Sabres are scoring in a top 10 rate in the NHL right now. So I don't – if I had
to get mad, Bunty, for bringing up good points like this. I want to be mad that Casey Middlestat's not the second-line center, and you're bringing up his terrible plus minus.
Are the Sabres better? No, they're not. Like this is the thing that frustrates me about Sabres fans. We're toxic right now because we're all frustrated and we're losing, but all of the things that we're toxic about are actually things that we shouldn't always be toxic about. Like the Sabres' biggest issue right now is that they're defensively irresponsible and their goaltending doesn't step up enough. So we get mad that they traded for a young defenseman that has the potential to be good, that could help our defense. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, last year, when we're not scoring goals, you miss Casey Middlestat because you're like, oh, we need goal scoring. He's what we need. This year, the problem isn't goal scoring; it's the ability to stop teams from scoring and saving pucks. So, what they don't need a Casey Middlestat right now. They need defensemen to be responsible and in the right spots. So, I still think I'm fine with the Bowen Byram trade because Kevin Adams' whole logic was that we can't convince any good free agent defenseman to come to Buffalo. So they're not going to come to us via that way. We can't trade for any because we're on their no trade clauses. So the only way we can really trade for a guy that has the potential to develop into a good defenseman is getting someone that has a no trade clause, which normally requires more risk. And in order to do so, you have to give up more. And Middlestat was always the player that, like, would he have re-signed in Buffalo? Would he have stayed long-term? Well, he was restricted, so probably. But, like, there's other things that go along with it that make it a little more complicated. And being a -6, like, I know people are going to say, like, that doesn't matter. It does matter. Like, that's the whole reason why we got guys like McLeod and on this roster. And it's like I think the moment that Dylan Cousins signed his extension, that was when like they made the decision that Casey
Yep.
Middlestat really wasn't going to be part of the future of the team. So it's like I get it from the fans are like, well, Cousins sucks. Well, when we signed him to the extension, he was coming off a 30-plus goal season. He had over 60 points, and Casey Middlestat hadn't even like established himself yet. So like hindsight, I think most like it looks bad, but I think in the moment every decision made sense.
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say about Bowen Byram, hopefully he can figure it out. The guy was a top 5 pick. He has potential, but he needs to play at a higher level. And I wouldn't just say that about Bowen Byram. I would say that the same about Rasmus Dahlin. Like
Mm-hmm.
Dahlin 2 years ago, we thought he was on a trajectory to becoming a star. I don't think he's playing like a top 5 defenseman this year. I think it's borderline if he's even a top 10 defenseman at the current moment. He makes too many mistakes on the ice. Very talented, very skilled, but Dahlin isn't the player that we talk him up to be at the current moment. And the whole defense core needs to be better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough evaluating this defensive core right now because they keep shooting themselves in the foot and a lot of goals against. At least that I see that I'm really, amplifying with just like the video series I do after games, which I think puts a bigger spotlight in my brain on a lot of these errors Sabres defensemen are making. But yeah, Bunty, you're right. In terms of at least noticing, these guys that we've noticed in the past, like a Dahlin, for example, he's not, as prevalent, which I think is a good thing for this team long term, where you're not solely relying on Rasmus Dahlin to be the lifeblood of this team to impact how games go. But again, it's early in the season. I think a lot of guys, for whatever reason, are coming off a little. It's like a step difference than what we've seen in the past with, we talked Dylan Cousins, Jack Quinn. I mean, and Dallings isn't a bad one. He's still the best defenseman on this team by a landslide. But I think for this team to make that jump, to go to that next level, you need guys to take that half step forward instead of, half step backwards or kind of remaining neutral when they're in their early 20s. And, speaking of fans being mad, the same old Sabres has been a talk online of, as things change throughout the organization, somehow things remain the same. I know, Bunt, we've talked all the time that this is a new Sabres team that, they're going in the right
The same
direction.
old Sabres.
But are they the same old Sabres, Bunty?
It's
Tell me.
crap. Like that is such a lazy thing to say. And I'll let you get your point in because I don't want to.
No, go for it. Let it go.
I have something. I have to go off on that once you're done.
No, go ahead, Bunt. But yeah, go ahead. Get off your chest because it seems like it's something right now.
It's the laziest take because it's results based and it has nothing to do with what they're doing to trying to fix the team. So saying same old like Sabres. So like for all of the years they had like Eichel and Reinhardt, like and guys like that. They had top end talent. They had literally no depth behind like the first pair. They had average defensemen and they had Omar who was good, who would save them, and it'd be low scoring games. Like the same old Sabres would be like, let's just care about all these young guys. Let them make all the mistakes that they make, not hold them accountable, not call them out, and just do the same thing on a nightly basis. The Sabres aren't losing games right now 5-1, like on a nightly basis. They're not struggling to score goals. They're not looking like an inept team out there. Like the first period yesterday when it was 1-1. There were some Sabres fans saying like, oh, this team looks like crap right now. I'm like, they're out shooting the Islanders like 12-8. They look fine. You just don't know how you're watching hockey. Like, know how I know this ain't the same old Sabres? When you see Jason Zucker getting in a fight, then go into the bench and say, let's go. That's a guy that's a veteran, that's been on good teams, that realized our team needs a spark. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. And then he nearly scores on a penalty shot. He doesn't let that get him down, scores a goal moments later. That's a veteran. That's a true veteran leader. That's not just some veteran that's Kyle Oposo or Eric Johnson. That's a guy that's been in the league forever. Zucker's a guy that's still making an impact as a veteran. You bring in guys like McLeod who fly down the ice, who have the ability to make an impact on the penalty kill, who who bring an energy both sides of the ice. You have a fourth line that's flying. Like, yes, they make mistakes. There's issues that they have. But this is not a team that lacks talent. This is not a team that lacks grit or speed. They have you can see it on a nightly basis. They're in all these games. They could have they could have finished a little better yesterday. They had 73 shots yesterday. 35, I think, on net. The other ones either blocked or missed the net. Like, we had games with the Sabres a couple years ago, where like they would struggle to get 30 shots. They'd struggle to get like 25 shots on net. Like, this team is generating chances. They have fight in them. They just need to figure a few things out. And then Lindy, after the game too, is calling them out on their errors. Lindy called out their defensive effort on the first goal and the fourth goal. Where was that with Don Granato? Where was that with previous coaches? Lindy Ruff has called out Rasmus Dahlin by name. Like, he's called out all these guys when they make mistakes. Like, what happens when you lose for a long period of time is that it becomes easy to say lazy things like same old Sabres, or these guys suck, or they don't do this, they don't do that. And the reality is that's the results game. Like, you can say everything easily after you see the results of something, but that doesn't mean the process to getting to that result was flawed or wrong. They are playing good. They're playing decent hockey. They are not getting the results that they want. Two totally different things. And to say same old Sabres, it's just fucking lazy. Like they could win the next 4 games, and those same people will then be like, oh my God, they look good now. What changed? Nothing changed. They just got some better results. Like, Lindy, after the game, is literally saying, we got to get back to playing better defensively. So now that's going to be the priority in the next few practices. Hopefully it doesn't take away from the offense. It's a delicate balance. And if people think they're doing the same crap that they've been doing the last 2-3 years, they're just proving their ignorance and their lack of knowing hockey. And you know what? There's a lot of people online, on Twitter, on social media that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they're honestly just not worth the time. The results suck, but that doesn't mean the process of getting the results is the same.
Exactly. And I know Bunt and I are getting told all the time we're the positivity podcast. That doesn't mean we think the Buffalo Sabres are going to go 82-0. We know there's going to be ebbs and flows throughout the course of a season. And like what Bunt said earlier, they're not going to blow up 5-1 every game. The Sabres, I read online, everyone's saying, that was one of the worst games they watched all year. They lost by 1 goal. Like, it's not like they got dog walked by the New York Islanders 6-1. It was a game that they were in, and you're going to lose games over the course of the season. That's why they happen early. You can build off that. And we've seen throughout the course of the season, when they win games, it's ways that are sustainable for the long run, where they're winning 5-on-5. Their power play's finally starting to find the back of the net. They're getting good goaltending, for most nights. And when that all comes together, this team is going to be a really good hockey team. And I get no one wants to hear, find these little victories here and there. But these aren't little victories anymore, Bunty. These aren't like, oh, this 19-year-old that we drafted had a really good play and was a -3 on the night, but he scored a really cool goal. This team is playing genuinely good hockey for the first time in a really long time. And it's just, you're not – the best teams in the league aren't winning 82 games in a row. There's going to be down nights.
Figuring things out.
Yes.
They're in a figuring things out period right now. And I – like I said, I get the frustration. Having an NHL record playoff drought, it sucks. It's unacceptable. There's been a lot of frustrating times. There's been a lot of times during the course of the last 13 years where we were preaching optimistic things and it fell short. But this is not one of those where we're just saying, oh, have faith, they're going to turn it around. You can see what they're doing is better than what they have been doing in the past. What they have to do is continue to come out on a nightly basis, play hard, try to fix the small things, and then eventually you will either figure it out or you won't. I think when I watch this team right now on a nightly basis, I go into most of these games thinking they have a chance at winning winning this contest. They beat Dallas, one of the best teams in hockey, who then went out and destroyed the Bruins. They beat the Panthers earlier this year. I know they were shorthanded, but the Panthers still were beating teams minus those two guys. And they just played the Panthers a couple nights ago. I know people say 5-2 final score. It was a 3-2 game with 6 minutes left in the third period with the Sabres and the Panthers with close to the same number of shots. It was a competitive back and forth game. Either team could have pulled it out. Panthers got a goal on a stupid Darlene penalty, and then they got another snipe, and they put it away. This team needs to figure out the small things right now. That is much different than what they were last year when they needed to figure out the big things. See, last year, the team was trying to fix their defense because 2 years ago, their defense is what cost them from making the playoffs. So they were really aggressive and they tried to help their defense out. And you saw what? It improved the goaltending and improved their goals allowed, but they couldn't score. What are they trying to do this year? They're trying to find the balance between how much offense and how it impacts their defense. What have we seen so far? They're scoring much more goals, positive. Negative, they're allowing more goals. Their goaltending has regressed a little bit. People always act like, oh, why can't the goaltending and the offense just match up? Well, it doesn't match up because normally when you're scoring more, there's reasons why you're scoring more. It's not just talent. It's how you're attacking. And when you're attacking more, you're more vulnerable in other areas. What Lindy is trying to instill in these guys, and Gates, you know all this stuff, so I'm not really preaching to you. I'm just preaching to the choir. Yeah. What Lindy is trying to teach this team is that we can be aggressive. We can take chances. We can be smart and let our offensive talent truly be out on display. But don't do that at the expense of being dumb in our own zone. And what you see in a loss against the Islanders was the first goal of the game they allowed and the fourth goal of the game they allowed. They had momentary lapses defensively, which gave away free goals, which are things you can't allow when you're going to be an aggressive team trying to create all these opportunities offensively. So what the long-term hope is that when you, after not just 1 month of preaching this to your players, but after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and they make the mistakes and they learn from them, that eventually it becomes not something they think about, but just natural instinct to be in the right spot. And then once that clicks, that's when you take it to the next level. And people say, same old Sabres. It's like, come on, like, are we not watching the same game? I'll say this. When I watch this team, I feel a more veteran presence than what I've seen in the past. Thompson is a veteran now. Tuck is a veteran. When I watch Peterka, he's young, but he's good. When I watch Zucker, when I see McLeod, when I see Greenway, when I see Lafferty, when I see some of these other guys, even defensively, like they have guys that know what they should be doing. They just got to execute. So will it come together? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it's not like they're making the rookie mistakes repeatedly over and over and over again. The mistakes they're making now are more dumb. Like, I should have been here. I was there. Like, it's not a skill thing now. They got to just get on the same page with each other.
Mm-hmm. And the crazy part about that too, Bunty, is they're still the youngest team in the entire NHL. And it's going to take some time, which obviously sucks to hear. But you know what's not going to take some time? Following Crossing Swords on Twitter, on Instagram at Crossing Swords Pod, following myself at Gatesy35, and following Bunty at Mike_Bunt. And before we close things up, your Buffalo Sabres play tonight, 7 o'clock against the Detroit Red Wings. Sabres favored in this game. Bunty, how are we feeling going into this one?
Well,
actually, they're dogs in this one a little bit.
Never back-to-back nights. Never a good thing. Detroit hasn't played since Tuesday, so honestly, I'm feeling this is most likely a loss, and that's just going to continue the negative narratives. At this point in time, I'm not. What I'll say is this: I'm not feeling great about the first 11 games of the year. I don't like sitting at 4-6-1. I don't like what that means going to the next 9 games to the quarter point of the season. I'm not feeling confident about my playoff pick right now. But my eyes tell me the product on the ice is better than what the record is. And people are going to say I'm crazy, and you know what? If they keep losing, they'll be able to back it up, and they'll be able to say they're right. And like I said, results don't mean process is right. Hockey is one of the few sports you could outshoot a team 30-5 and you could lose 4-1. Like, hockey ain't always fair how it plays out. But if you keep putting good efforts out, you keep doing the things that they're doing and trying to correct their issues, eventually you hope you can figure it out. And I don't feel great tonight about them playing the Red Wings, but it could go either way. It's just how fresh are their legs? Do they have any legs on them? Hopefully they can come out get a win, because 4-7-1, you're putting yourself in a hole. And as much as I feel like this team will eventually get it going, I don't want them to get too much of a hole going into midseason. Really would make it a challenging situation for them.
Exactly. And I think, playing back to backs is always difficult, especially, home and then on the road is never an easy task. But I think this is a really big opportunity for the Sabres team to prove that they are, I know it's same old Sabres, a different team, that they can, have a game last night where they make some mistakes. And against a team like the Islanders, you make mistakes, they're going to capitalize on it because that's just the team they are, and you go to Detroit and they show up in Detroit and they play a good game and they win. I think that goes a long way into building some momentum for the squad that they can, find success after having a shortcoming because, again, they're the youngest team in the league. They're still trying to figure out a lot of issues that they've accumulated over the past 7 years of interesting coaching and playing styles. It's going to take a little bit of time and getting, I think, that assurance that what they're doing is working, that everything Butt and I are saying to you guys and basically to ourselves in the mirror, that the Sabres team is sustainable, that they're doing the right things, and it's going to lead to success down the road, and it's going to be success now. Like, that's the crazy part about hockey. You see it every playoffs. So there's a team that barely makes it in that goes on a crazy playoff run because that's how hockey works. Either a team gets hot, goaltending gets hot, just a couple bounces here and there are the difference between being eliminated in the first round and hoisting the Stanley Cup. And we're going to see that throughout the course of an 82-game season. The Sabres team, they're 4-6-1 right now. That can go either direction. They had those 2 terrible games in Prague that I think we all want to forget about. You take that out, they're 4-4-1, and I think their season really changed. I mean, the team in Prague versus the team in North America are 2 very different. So we just look at North America, they're 4-4-1, they're 500. We've seen flashes of really good things, and we've seen mistakes that have cost them night in and night out. And I think over the course of the next, I'm not a math guy, Bunty, but 71 games, we're going to see that success is going to be sustainable. We're not going to go on a 10-game winning streak and then lose the next 18 and fire a coach. That's not going to be in the cards this year. They're going to be, win a couple, lose a couple. Hopefully that those wins are more than the losses at the end of it. But I think that's where I'm at, Bunty. I don't know if you have any more closing thoughts before we wrap things up here.
I'm with you. It's way too early to be jumping off a bridge, and
Yes.
too many fans treat this like the NFL. There's 82 games. Each game is worth a slightly more than 1% of your season. So, let's not be freaking out every time they win a couple in a row or they lose a couple in a row. Like, it's like we forget that the year they had 91 points, they went on an 8-game losing streak. Like, people are saying the shit about that team too, and then they start winning games, and it's like, you know what? The 05-06 Sabres, they weren't even the best team early on in the year. The team that went to the Stanley Cup, let me look up the 05-06 Sabres to see where they were at one point. I just want to pull this up, and then I'll let you go after that. So at one point in the year, the 05-06 Sabres, before they figured out, they were 8-9. Like, they were struggling. That team was predicted to finish last in the league. How do you think Sabres fans were feeling at that point? They were probably like, yeah, you know what was happening? They had like 12,000 fans a game at that point. And then it ended up being one of the greatest seasons in Sabres history. So that was 17 games into the season when they really started getting things going. And I'm not saying this is 05-06 Sabres, but it's like the point is that team was coming off a 3-year playoff drought. There was a lockout. They were 8-9. They were picked to be the last in the league. And if Twitter existed at that time, no, Twitter would be saying these guys suck. They're horrible. Well, just because you say stuff like that doesn't mean you're right. People have been saying that before Josh Allen. People thought the Bills were awful and that they would never turn things around and they wouldn't get things going. And even when they had Josh Allen, there was half the league that thought that he was a parody of a quarterback and that he wasn't going to figure things out. The fact of it is, when you're an organization that's been losing for a long time, it's easy to just always say that people suck because you just assume that more often than not, you're going to be right when you say that. But as I've said multiple times on the show, just because you say something like that doesn't mean that you're right. It doesn't make you skilled or that there's any logic to that. You're just assuming that because the team has always sucked, that they're just always going to continue to suck, which puts no thought or anything into what you're saying. Another thing I want to kind of call out a little bit, I love hockey analytics. I love football analytics. But some of these metrics numbers guys are absolutely ridiculous too when it comes to some of the information with the Sabres. You need a delicate balance between both. And some of the things that are being said and some of the charts and the things that people put up there are just absolutely stupid. I'm not calling out anyone individually because I know if I say something, people might share it and then be like, oh, why is this guy taking a shot at me? But you know what? There's more to hockey than just numbers. At the end of the day, you got to put the puck in the back of the net. It doesn't matter how you do it. And yes, if you generate more chances on a night by night basis, you're going to probably end up scoring more. So yes, there's things that you want to follow. But with Lindy, I see a team that is figuring things out. And it was kind of naive for people to think that 1 month into a brand new head coach that running the team, that suddenly they would look perfect and that they would be gelling and be on fire. I see a team that has already transformed the way I watch them on a nightly basis. 1 month in, I'll mark that down as a positive.
Yep.
Keep making progress, and I'll feel better about it going forward. But that's my final thought is, can we keep things in perspective and reality? It's 1 month into a brand new coach, after all these issues that we've had with these youngsters, and they're playing a decent, not great, but a decent brand of hockey, and people are upset and calling it the same old Sabres. Honestly, it'd be best if 90% of people that tweet about the Sabres just didn't have social media accounts because a lot of the stuff is just absolute crap. And I shouldn't say that as a Sabres content creator because that'll probably hurt us, but that's the last thing I'll say. It's patience.
I get sometimes it's like talking to a wall. I know we have this beautiful brick background before our streams now, and sometimes it feels like talking to it because we keep saying this team is going to find success because we want to see, we're picturing this long-term, Bunty. And I think a lot of issues fans have is they see it on a game-by-game basis, whether, they're just bigger fans of the Bills and each game for the Bills means a lot more than each game for the Sabres. And again, like we talked about, that's just the game of hockey where
it's the lack of patience.
Yes.
Because they've been bad for so long. So they don't want to wait for it to happen. But when you change a head coach and you change what you're doing, it's not going to happen overnight. So it's just unrealistic expectations. They get a new head coach and they think the team should suddenly look like this when they were here. And now the team is looking like this, but it's still same old Sabres because they demand if you're not at this level, then you this and this, there's no difference because you're still not a playoff team. So
aren't they 11-0, Bunty? They should be 11-0 right now, be in the top of the league. Everyone should have 500 goals at this point. I don't know what they're doing. Fire Lindy.
But Gatesy, good show. Unfortunately, I got to go.
Yes.
But always love talking hockey with you.
We figured out today this is not the same old Sabres, and we are not your same old Sabres podcast because sometimes our signals get crossed, but our swords always are. Follow me at Gatesy35, at Mike_Bunt, at Cross Swords Podcast. Thank you to the great people at Batavia Downs. Let's go Sabres.